Okay. Morning, everybody. Thank you for sparing the time to attend today. I'm Councillor John Bailey, Chair of the Somerset Council for Marton. I'll read out the standard regs. Worth noting the principal function of the Standards Committee is to be responsible for promoting and enforcing the high standards of conduct by members and co-opted members and assisting members and corporate members to observe the Council's code of conduct. The agenda and pages have been published on the Council website in advance of the meeting. Please can members and officers refer to the page numbers on the agenda to assist or present to find the appropriate information. Today's meeting is in a hybrid format with committee and key officers physically present in Dean House. Not Dean House, we're in the Windmill Room. Other related members and officers may remotely join the meeting to speak to the items or observe. The Council will be making a recording of the meeting to assist the recording of our discussion. For those attending remotely, please only use the chat function for agenda items and or to indicate that you wish to speak. Use the hand facility and MS Teams, please. Please only speak at my invitation. Please say your name before speaking. Please remember to turn off your microphones and cameras when not speaking to reduce the strain on the bandwidth. Please remember if you're physically in the room to speak clearly into your microphones, which we don't seem to have. Oh, right, we're all going to be picked up from the end of the room. Very much. Before we move into apologies, I think it's useful for everybody perhaps to take them around the room and introduce themselves. Perhaps starting with Alan.
Alan Hemsley, co-opted member living in Carhampton, Minehead.
New Davis, Lieutenant Watchett, down to security to present. Councillor.
Francis Nicholson, Exmoor, and August 23 Parish.
David Strick, co-opted member and parish councillor in Kingston.
David, and we have someone join us today, Alf.
Yeah, Alex Seaman, and I'm just work experience.
Thank you, Alf.
Thank you. So I'm Josh Barrett. I'm with Democratic Services. I'm covering for Claire.
Mr. Rebecca, thank you, Josh.
I'm a green governance officer, telling you to speak.
Morning, Ali Jones. I'm Executive Director for Resources, Strategy and Transformation. I'm also Monitoring Officer. I'm standing in for Scott.
I'm Brian Spackley, Labour member for Bridgewater South.
Fanny Foster, co-opted member and parish councillor of Fanny.
Ewan Jones, Chief Executive of Somerset Association of Local Councils.
Martin Timoney, Somerset Councillor for Froome West.
Linda Height, Somerset Councillor for Shepton Malin and Croscombe.
That is new to the committee, so welcome.
Thank you.
Particularly, and I'm sure you'll have a great contribution to make. Okay, let's move on to the agenda. I've got a couple of 2 or 3 items I want to pick up, but I will cover apologies first, I think. The apologies, I've got one from Paul Weaver. No, that's okay. Okay, I'll cover the minutes of the previous meeting in a moment. But I just wanted to cover a couple of points which come up in the minutes while I remember them. Before actually, firstly, the priority groups. There was a discussion about that meeting. The last meeting I wasn't attending, and what we agreed at the workshop last year on the 18th of July was to reallocate certain areas of the objects from the Standards Committee to each of the priority groups. And so I'll send that round a year ago, following on this meeting, just to remind everybody. We have a watching group, brief little part of our objects, even if there's nothing else called for you to do. Second thing is that, and these are just bringing you up to date on issues, one of the councils that have been involved in quite a lot more involvement, I've spoken to them about this, approached me at a meeting. I wasn't aware that there'd been a letter come from the Somerset County about support that could be given. And so I spoke to Alan, and I think that on the actions that in the future make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on, so we're all working, supporting each other on the action plan. The third thing is to just bring you up to date, because we had only one hearing last year, whether we've had any one hearing group anyway, and that was at the start of last year. One of the things we asked was to have a feedback on whether our recommendations had been implemented and that they could be ticked off. And checked, and Tonya came back to me and said that all of them were implemented, they're all done. I think it's important that when we have those hearing groups, and at the time we thought we were going to go for one of them, but that whatever we do, that we not only action something, but we check that it's do that, and perhaps that could happen. Not that we've had another hearing subgroup, but that it could happen on other issues when there are other things that happen. You can just check if the policies have been implemented as well as followed. So that's my three. So moving on to the minutes. Shall we just run through the minutes? I think we're going to pick up some of the can we put up the minutes? Lost you. Sure you won't have time to look through them. Are there any points before I raise my points that you want to pick up?
Sorry, are we on accuracy or matters arising?
Accuracy first.
Right, okay.
So are we all happy to accept the minutes as accurate? Move on to matters arising. I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't say they're adopted, and I guess Brian will sign them. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything in there that you feel should be a matters arising? I've got some things, and they're mostly, they should be all on the agenda. Just for completeness, just letting you know that's the case. No more? Okay, thank you. Moving on to public question time. Sorry, declaration of interest.
I haven't got a copy, but I'll get.
Okay. Declaration of interest. People want to make clear that aren't already in your declarations anymore. Public question time. I understand that there are no questions. Okay. So that's very quick to the point. Action plan and progress. Well, that's going to come up in the reports. Go through. Go on. The action plan as I go along. Code of conduct complaints. So we've got two code of conduct reports. One is the annual report. That's the first one we're going to look at. Next one is the quarterly update. Alan,
Thank you. So I'll build them in two separate items. That's okay, Chair. Yeah, that's on the agenda. So first and foremost, the annual review of code of conduct complaints. This is the in terms of annual reports. There's issues out focusing on complaint volumes, any emerging themes, and anything in terms of delays or responses to targets. So as you'll see from the report, total number of complaints was 61. We had 50 unique incidents as part of that, with a peak in complaints around June. The acknowledgement target is being regularly hit of one case. The substantive response target isn't being met at this stage, mainly because we are waiting. There are a number of delays in the process, waiting responses from subject members, needing further information from complainants, requirement to consult with the independent person in a number of instances, but also the increasing complexity of complaints. What I would say is that whilst members, when we are getting to the place where we're finalising the scope of the complaint, it is often difficult because the nature in which the complaint has been, with lots of detail around and also a number of individuals being named as part of the process, because it can't be a standard complaint that just doesn't talk about one individual, but it talks about the conduct at a particular meeting or through a particular lens of a meeting. As a result of that, that results in some complexity, boiling the issue down into the actual point and making sure that we're really clear on the scope of the investigation as part of that. So that complexity is certainly causing some delay in dealing with it. In terms of the main essence of the outcomes, a number of them are on no further action cases. So a significant proportion result in no further action. A number of them are out of jurisdiction. So, for example, a complaint about how a meeting went, it's not in the jurisdiction of the authority, or the conduct's not in the jurisdiction of the authority, but the complainant doesn't feel like they have or know how to raise that matter through another route. So we often receive complaints through monitoring so that could reasonably and appropriately be dealt with far earlier and far quicker at the level. We're seeing a number of areas where we're pushing back as a result of that. We're seeing some that are partially upheld or upheld completely. So in terms of the sort of general areas of complaint, and we'll get into this in a bit more detail, I'm sure, with the quarterly reports, but we are seeing an increase in the number of disrespect claims coming in, which I think is something that we want to consider, Chair. If you're asking for my recommendation, that's something that I believe we should do a bit more work as officers to support you as a committee on those matters. Bringing the councillors to dispute being due to action, and I have to say, having looked at all of these complaints, there is a fine line between disrespect and conduct at meetings and bringing councillors to disrepute. So that's the kind of general line. A basic one, and I think it's something for us to do with your committee chair and with you around declaring interest. We're seeing that becoming really problematic and registers of interest across town and parish councils in the city, but also at the unitary council, requiring a number of reminders to be issued. So I think there'll be some basics. So forgive me, Chair, it's not about their weight or their complexity, but I think it's about getting the basics right in a number of different instances and ensuring that members know how to raise complaints in the right way, where the first line is going to be. That's it from my introduction, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions or participate.
Well, perhaps picking the first two up, you mentioned respect as one and declarations of interest. Have you got any thoughts about how this committee might take that forward? Firstly, respect. I know that it's been reiterated yesterday at full council. How might we be part of supporting that going forward?
I think there are a number of softer approaches, Chair, and a number of harder ones. So the softer approaches, I think, as we as officers are doing this as well, more and more from a leadership perspective, but also every aspect of the organisation begins calling out the behaviours that don't meet our values and behaviours and our members. I think the earliest opportunity, politely and respectfully, is quite key, and ensuring that those matters are dealt with quite quickly. Chairs of committee itself also call that out. So if there was an inappropriate discussion of behaviour within committees, I think calling that out at the earliest opportunity and dealing with it in the room would reduce the number of complaints significantly. It tends to be matters, and I have to say, having looked at a number of town and parish council complaints that have come through, they could be reasonably dealt with in the room, but they're not. Calling out that behaviour early often deals with it, and you all know this because it's the standard behaviour that we all would adhere to, but I think sometimes it's about kind of starting to escalate that from the chair, vice chair, but also from the committee themselves. Taking that moment, taking that pause, is really quite helpful. In terms of the wider issues around disrespect, I think it's more about there is also the, dare I say it, the cut and thrust of politics. Yeah, that sometimes it's about that reasonable and appropriate debate in those discussions, and that's appropriate. We have case law that sets out what the scope of that debate is going to be, and it's absolutely the right as your right as members to have that opportunity to debate it and raise those in the tone that you feel appropriate. I think it's also recognising that that's the nature of some of those committees and some of those debates and allowing that to take place. So that's what I mean by that where is the line.
Mm.
I think he's calling out the behaviour that's not right, but also recognising that members, you are able and should be able to go through reasonable political debates, get into those matters. I think again, it's just not understanding. So we're going to do some training, and it would be really helpful that we bring that here first, your review, and then as part of that, we can sort of put sponsorship of that with not only yourself as chair and vice chair, but also with the committee, the champion that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alan. I'll just cover the declaration of interest then, which we have made. Sorry, you made sorry, on respect, you made two issues, one soft and one hard. Have both of those in it.
Yeah, so I think the softer one is about that kind of ensuring that we are addressing that behaviour as we see it. And to call it out earlier, the harder measure is that formal training and being really clear where those lines are likely to be. And that's what I mean. I think it's some of this is best not written down, some of this about how we think of ourselves. So those general behaviours and those general stuff.
Moving on to declarations of interest then, and I'll open to the rest of the group. How do you see what recommendation what you have in terms of taking that forward?
So I think for us, again, we would like to be able to kind of reaffirm how to declare interest and provide some responsibility of members in particular across all town parish, all councils, to ensure that they are reporting those and recording in the right way. They're regularly kept up to date. It's not just about declaring the interest, that issue falls away. Please update it as part of that process. So we've already had a conversation about Parish with the room, but with Ewan and his role at SALC around how do we begin to remind towns, parishes, and also unitary councillors of the need to ensure that they are conducting themselves in that way and they're keeping updated. We will be putting reminders out naturally how to declare interest, what is an interest. Again, running that through the instance to make sure the advice and guidance is clear.
Okay, Martin, sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll go around the room first and pick anybody up.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. In terms of the type of complaints that you're getting, would you say, I'm asking you for some ballpark figures here, not specifics, but that a lot, what is the bulk of the complaints? Are they councillor on councillor, or are they public to councillor of councillors? What would you say?
I'd say that it's about balance, to be quite honest. I think there are those members of the public that are raising concerns, complaints about how meetings are conducted in some instances.
Yeah.
And in some instances, it's councillor on councillor. Let's use your language. So we're seeing, I don't like the way that that councillor spoke to me on this point or dealt with that matter.
Would you say that most of those complaints come from within parish councils, or do they come from within Sussex?
I think by nature of the number of councils that we've got, I think the volume is there. You can imagine that whilst I am incredibly concerned on contract perspective around of town and parish councils, and that's the conversation we're having with you and in his role, my principal concern is the unitary council and ensuring that was
But may I continue, John?
Yes,
Yeah, I just said that my observations are from the meetings I attend, they're usually conducted pretty politely, and I don't see a lot. And I have had certain things in the committee I chair where I've had to stop somebody saying something because it was inappropriate, but on more than one occasion. But as you say, that's fairly easy to do within the room. So I'm sort of surprised. It's interesting to know how many of these complaints come from the parish councils about Somerset councillors. But I'm of the view, and I've expressed this before, and I know it's a not logistical thing, but maybe a legal thing, but I think Somerset council should be held to exactly the same standards when they're at a parish council meeting or town council meeting as they are as Somerset councillors. And I think there is evidence, suggestions that some people are getting away with it, that they're behaving differently when they go into parishes. You're smirking slightly as if you may well agree with me, but you couldn't possibly comment. Is there any way that can be written into code of conduct or enforced?
So forgive me, Chair, through you. So apologies for my smirk, but absolutely, that is one of the instances we are seeing. by virtue of the fact that, and again, give the expression, but twin hatters,
Yes.
we are seeing a need to remind all councillors, but particularly those with twin hats, around the responsibilities of that. And actually, that's why I reference softer and harder measures. The softer measures are about how do all members conduct themselves in both environments. Yeah, the volume absolutely is within the town and parish council sector because of the number of meetings that take place. That's naturally where these complaints have emerged from. And relatively speaking, the number for a council our size is relatively low. So it's not a huge issue, but I think from looking at the previous discussions we've had in this, you and the council holding standards very highly, and that's why I'm kind of mirroring that how I'm conducting these reviews.
Yeah, if I may, I think also you can broaden that, because I'm not a twin hatter, but I go to parish council meeting, and I think I think most of us do, and so the point still stands, whether they're twin hatters or not, they're still asked to contribute at those meetings. Through the chair, may I just ask one more question?
You may.
And it's about you mentioning the declarations of interest. I'm intrigued. Is there any one or two particular areas of declaration of interest that are common factors, or are they various? Are they?
They tend to be various. I think outside interests, particularly things like representation or members or boards or directorships, those types of things tend to need to be kept up to date regularly. And it's incredibly important that those matters are referred to correctly. So we will be reminding all members who need to keep us up to date, because to be frank, the situation is quite grave if you don't keep your declaration of interest, as you all know. So effectively, the monitoring officer in my team have no other route through. I think this is sometimes missed. No other route through that if you see a breach associated with not keeping up to date with your interest, the only way we can deal with it is to further master.
Yeah. And would it be probing too hard to say, does this happen? Does it happen in safe planning?
I've not seen any cases in planning
Where it might be crucial.
I've not seen any cases in planning where members haven't declared an appropriate interest. It's not, but I would argue, it's probably one area where we are, as officers, incredibly vigilant to ensure that we are not. Yeah. But that's not to say it doesn't happen, and that's not to say we haven't dealt with.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Martin. Francis.
Yeah, various things. Just on the last point, there's a thing about declaring interests on your register and the thing about the meetings. Now, I do remember a full council meeting where people who had, I am certain, absolutely declared that they were private landlords on their register of interests. Clearly didn't realise that meant they really ought not to be voting on how we were doing rateable value on empty properties. How we were doing it. So there are two things there. One is getting on and the other is actually that means I can't do this in the meeting. It was about whether we were going to do double council tax from day one. And suddenly a load of people suddenly thought, I really ought not to be here. It might have been, if everybody had been awake, they'd have said so at the beginning of the meeting and not in the middle of the debate. So that was my main other point is chairing. Whether I'm not a twin hatter, thank goodness, never have been, never wish to be. I go to parish councils, I speak at the invitation of the chairman, I don't speak otherwise. I have not been at meetings where I hear there were accusations and unpleasantnesses. I unfortunately wasn't there, so I don't know. But I do believe that a part of addressing the issue in terms of training that is not only training for members as to what they should do, but training for chairs to chair as opposed to sit there not chairing. And I'm absolutely certain that you chair, and deal with things. But it comes to it comes to the dealing with it in the moment, and so maybe there is chairing for or training for chairs in this authority, and maybe there's whatever Salt can do with its members to, because it is outrageous that a Twin Hatter or any member who's not a Twin Hatter, it's because that they're a member of this authority, they have some extra weight in the parish council. They don't. But the chair has to deal with that.
Alan would like to.
If I may, so thank you for the points, Francis. I think there are, so two substantive points there. One is around declarations of interest in particular. I think some of this is, that's why I'd like to bring it back into this committee around the guidance and advice, because that's why I was aware of that one particularly, because a number of members approached me on the day
Exactly.
to raise that particular point. Now, in those instances, the issues were debated there, they were fine, I was comfortable with the approach that's taken, but it's something about doing that sooner. So dealing with it in the moment is challenging because it relies on the experience of the officers that members are speaking to, and ultimately the monitoring officer judgment is final anyway. But at the end of the day, having that in advance is incredibly helpful because we can give good and proper advice in a timely manner. Doing that 2 minutes before the debate is incredibly challenging, and we do our best, and we have some incredible officers, but it is an ask. So
This is something.
no, I don't appreciate it, but we do our best as part of that process. In terms of the sharing role and advice and guidance, I think that's exactly the conversation we've had with you as well about the upskill, and I wouldn't actually put members only here. Just have a role, so clerks in meetings, and also colleagues like myself and Josh and others need to be able to have conflicts, be able to raise with issues with the chair if appropriate. And we
He
all
also gives the chair the gavel, but he can't make it bang it.
We are quite convincing.
You say that first, Francis. Is that a quotation?
That's a quotation.
Ah. Don't want to do. Thank you, Francis.
If I may share as well, I think, forgive me, I don't wish to kind of make a mountain out of a molehill here, but it's really important that we're dealing with standards complaints, we're dealing with numbers. It's just important that this is the theme that's coming through, and the standards committee, you were really clear with me, John, when we first had a conversation about advising what the issues are and what. I'm certainly not making a mountain out of a molehill.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to move around.
Yes.
Come back to you in a moment, Martin.
Yes, yeah.
Alan.
Couple of points, Chairman. When we're looking at training of chairman, let's put it up, presumably we'll also be looking to offer it to town parish city councils. And if so, can we as members of the standards committee be invited to those so that we can hear and put over our point of view on how they should be, how the training should be delivered, and how the responses from the various chairs are incredible. You know, that way. And on declarations of interest, can I suggest that each member is sent their current declaration of interest once a year? They are. I've not had one sent to me.
Oh, well, this committee, sorry.
No, all members,
Yeah.
all 100 and whatever they are.
Just done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things we need to pick up there, and I'm not going to ask for the Friday group to pick this up. I'll go to you first.
Yes, so
Thank you,
well, main points and well, basically 2 points, but the second one's in 2 parts. The first one is exactly on the very good point Alan makes about holding it out in the room. And we had a very constructive meeting on Friday, but we didn't discuss that point. And it sort of widening it, it was comments about the parish's conference last November, that there was some behaviour in the room that could have been called out. I think about it at many local community networks. We know there's particular individuals. So we're also aware that the standards of chairing for town and parish councils, and there's 270 of them, remember, so that's why there's the volume can be improved. So while the conversation was going on, I checked like our next, so South's next training course, which is we've retitled from chairpersonship to chairpersonship, on making council meetings work. It's not targeted at people who are, they don't have to be existing chairs, they could be considering chairing a substantial committee. It's on the 11th of August. I'd encourage, I'll send the link to you. So, yeah, please join.
I can't unfortunately.
But there will be more, but I'd also, just a general point, that we've spoken a lot about code of conduct and other courses. It's not just about code of conduct, it's about chairpersonship as well. Let's promote that heavily and let's do more of it. Because it's I will check that when I click the loop. I'll send it out. Let me click on that link and check exactly what time it is. Just the other 2 points are basically about inquiries coming in, because obviously we deal with a lot of inquiries, and I happen to be processing more than my usual share this week because Sam's on holiday. But then we've recently decided that I'll deal with all code of conduct inquiries given my role here. So we're basically getting 2 sorts coming in. This is before there's a problem, people come in, generally clients asking a question. One of them is basically about declarations of interest, which usually is pretty quick to answer. It's like, from what you've told me, it looks like that there is a disposable interest here or there isn't. That's a personal interest, you might want to deal with it this way. The second one is that long-running disputes within councils. Often it does involve twin hatters, but it doesn't always involve twin hatters. And it's clerks working out how to deal with that. I actually think standards of sharing and upping that could be a very good way of dealing with it. And I'm just clicking that then. Oh, it's 6 p.m. Monday.
Martin?
Yes,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yeah, the declarations of interest, I mean, I think I'm right in saying, I mean, I was in a situation planning where something came up and I used to work for the organisation and I wasn't sure. So I asked legal advice. I mean, there's always the get out, isn't it? Am I right? You know, in a meeting, if something comes up and you suddenly think, hang on, I don't think I've declared this, or is this a thing? You put your hand up and ask, don't you? There's not really an excuse, I don't think, for not declaring an interest. There can be genuine confusion, but
I think that's the
yeah, you've got another chance to declare it.
Just to that point, I think absolutely, as you all know, as experienced members, that's exactly the process to pull it out. But also those more technical elements where you have an interest.
Yeah.
If in doubt, ask, which in the same breath, really. So the disclosable pecuniary interest that you may or may not have, it's ensuring that they're kind of set out as well. And again, if in doubt, the monitoring officer team, and probably always good opportunity since my appointment as monitoring officer. That's in place now, regular review, so we meet on a weekly basis to review governance matters across the organisation, but also complaints, look at themes and issues, but also then assign to each of the deputy monitoring officers and myself a caseload. So each of the teams now, I don't know if the members are aware of this, but there are. So that's how the workload is managed and split across that. Each of them tends to pick up a theme or a topic area, but it's not necessarily exclusive. So that's how the resource is used as part of that. But I am able then to track, check on things like member complaints, for example, of what the implication from a resource perspective has basically. So I hope to bring that as part of my next say, this is how I'm going to bring that. This is the nature of them. And this is the indicative cost as well. So I think that's probably something that we have to see in the industry.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment there. We have asked for the cost, and we'll get to it. It was on some of the reports I haven't noticed recently. There was a column added by David Clark right at the end on the right side. They put an idea of the cost and it says going back probably from September last year. I'll just check my facts on that. Thank you, Alan. David.
Yes, just two points about the process, really. So one is the fact that only 40% of cases were completed within the 20 days. So do we need to look at the process again? You know, is that a realistic expectation that we're giving people when only 40%? You know, should we switch? And you know, I take your point about the increasing complexity and response and whatever else, but was 20 days a bit ambitious? Should we actually change that to 30 days? First point. And the second point is just about the cases that were out of jurisdiction. You know, is there more we can do to give people more information about where their complaints ought to go? So that, you know, I can imagine it's very confusing, and actually when I was looking at the process, you know, it's very unclear, and I was very unclear to me as an outsider as to what's a complaint against, what is a code of conduct complaint. So just to clearer, yeah, it would save everyone, so save your time. And, you know, if somebody's been 5 days into a complaint or 2 weeks into a complaint and then found they've gone the wrong route, you know, there's nothing more frustrating, so we need to look at that.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So I would agree entirely with the comments. And I think that's the discussion that you and I had with the monitoring officer team around providing that guidance around parity. What are those issues? Where's the first line of inquiry?
Yeah.
We're seeing a number of matters escalate to monitoring.
Yeah.
Because people don't understand the process. So, well, if in doubt, push the big red button and send it to the monitoring officer for review. Whereas actually that should be your last line.
Yeah.
If you're unsatisfied with how that's being dealt with. And there are those individuals that choose to escalate without going through that process. So it's two steps. One is on lack of clarity, and you can see that, and that's something you and I did discuss about how we kind of get that clarity between us. And the second one is, no, I don't want to deal with the process that my parish council or my town council or the unit council. I want to escalate this directly to you as a monitoring officer. And that's the behaviour point that we need to kind of address, because often we just refer it back, and that frustrates the complainant, frustrates the parish council that they've not had the opportunity to deal with it or consider it. I'm using parish council as an example, apologies, but that's the issue I think we could really work on address.
Anybody else in the room before Robin's that? Sorry, Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very interested in this debate, Chair, because going around my parishes and town councils, you see what's happening face to face. And what I find quite upsetting is the challenge on the chairman or chairperson, I do apologise. And there seems to be no way that they can hold their seat sometimes, because the localism of the people that are in there, they're all villagers, and it might not be political, but they're political for what they're after, but they do bring politics into it. And actually, one party was named by one person, which quite shocked me. And I think we've got a very strong case to challenge these people, but it happens and it's too late for us then. And the poor little chairs, you know, floundering through no fault of their own. So what we're saying today, we've really got to work hard in putting these people together. And I find it mainly with the parishes where they're changing over. There's new people, perhaps with some of my parishes. So every other month, there are new people and they join and think, oh, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then they interrupt the procedure of everything. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do, yeah. I think we all see that in probably many of, if not most of the parish councils that we go to the meet. I'll perhaps come back to that point in a moment or two. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about the number of complaints that were dismissed. Was that because they were not valid complaints in the first place, or was it that the process had run its course? And I'm just aware at the time, is that about an education matter? Valid? No part of that we've been discussing in.
I mean, those that were neither upheld. Probably not what I'm looking for. So, yeah. Okay.
I think my take on it is generally that it's not a valid complaint. It's a concern or a behavioural issue, but it's not a matter of a standards complaint. It has to do the way in which conversation was had or discussions took place that an individual felt aggrieved about are the forms and that's where that first line of emphasis through those conversations or through the conduct the meeting, the chair, the support, just in particular, and calling those things out, rather than a process kind of failure or whatever it may be. It tends to be just not significant enough for the individual field to read, but the only way in which they can raise it is through.
Thank you, Alan. Hi. Have we got anybody outside the room who would now like to raise a question? Can't see any hands up. I can't see anybody actually.
Never mind, no, probably apology.
Does it? All right, so nobody's on the right. Okay, well, be very quick about that. Okay, let me try and sum up a bit then. I think coming back to Martin's initial question, there's quite a lot of data that you're looking for, Martin, about who's doing what, the who in the quarterly complaints. To identify. So please have a think about what's in there and where it might need to be beefed up or even heaven forbid reduced.
I do accept there might be. In asking questions, if we go delve too deeply, it might actually be too easy to disclose whoever it is that may have committed whatever offence they were supposed to have committed. So I'm not sure how much we can do.
So I'll pick that one up when we
Yeah.
quarterly.
Can I ask a related question to Alan on this?
Yeah.
Just like when you ask somebody to explain themselves, is a member of the Somerset Council, is the group leader ever involved in resolving this?
Chair, in certain instances, yes.
Yeah.
In certain instances, we make the group leaders aware of the issue, and I tend to do that personally. Or one of the deputies who I'm confident has the experience of raising those sensitively. But in instances where it's a significant escalation.
Yeah.
Again, apologies, Chair, I've already spoken too much already this morning. But just on the topic of one of the points I would like to get to a place where on a quarterly basis, having an individual meeting with each of the group leaders to talk about the number of complaints, if any, that have come through for any of their group members, so that you are more sighted on issues that don't normally escalate, or just so you can see it. I make no judgment of the raising that, but an opportunity for the group leaders to be aware of what's been submitted to members of their group, so that they are cited more than anything else. Again, not loaded with any implication or emphasis.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alan. Okay, let me sum up if I can then. We'll look past the numbers again when we come back to the quarterly review. The point that David made about 20 days, I think what I'd like to propose is that P1, who's got the overarching brief on this one, gets together. We've now got the annual data. I think that's a good point at which we meet and look at how we actually go in a bit more detail to that. And you know who the members of P1 are. So it's myself, Brian, Francis, David and Paul Hooper. I'll put that up. We have a review following on from the annual report. And what we talked about today, review the process, and also now we've got the data. We'll come back to one other thing I meant to mention earlier on. So that should take account of the 20 days. Also, one of the things that I was going to ask Alan is that when it can't reach the 20 days, and that's the bit where we're open about. We did say that the parties would be kept in the loop, and in fact 20 days is not going to be met, and there'll be a new deadline set. Is that happening? Right. So in some ways it's a sort of a bit of an unknown amount, but we'll come back to that when we review that. The priority one. On the costs, I think we'll come back to quarterly data. But coming back to how we sort of change hearts and minds, if you like. I think probably we've got control to a certain extent over the members of the Somerset Council, hopefully, and we can actually work through them. And I know this is so hopefully we can set up processes that will actually come back to them. Perhaps I want to pick that one up when we come to the declarations of interest and the hospitality area later on in the agenda, if I may. When we go up to the parish councils, then really we have we're only able to suggest, I suppose. And it's quite difficult there, and I take the points you've made and I think others have made that they are quite a variable bunch. One, who wants to do it? Question, and that's a limited number. Two, what skills do they bring to the party? And that's another question. And some of them have skills, some haven't. And three, how actually well do they implement this sort of skills? And the turnover is quite large as well. And I'm not sure, having sat in a number of parish councils, how many read, don't want to admit it, by the way, how many have read the sort of things they sign before they sign up. But I think that's part of what we need to do, working together. And hopefully it's something that perhaps Ewan will come back to with the verbal update at the end, last part of the agenda. So I'd like to propose that we refer this whole area to P1, if everybody's comfortable with that. Where that then is not got a priority group, but we'll come back to that perhaps having the meeting for May. An extra body. Fine. Yes, David, sorry, I've just cursed my computer.
I think it's a really good idea to look at. I've been a parish councillor for a while and I can't remember what the process was, but sort of what I signed or what I. Is there a place for looking at that and actually, you know, maybe getting reams of stuff to sign, but you actually just highlight 5 points that your behaviour.
Yeah.
Sort of relating back to the principles of
The no one principle. Yeah.
just sort of,
They are the fundamental sort of
Yeah.
bricks.
yeah,
Really,
what
which
that means.
yeah,
What that means.
okay, good point there. Ewan?
Yeah, just sort of helpful to come in on the process. I've been looking at it recently and that, yeah, so when you sign acceptance of office, which means you to behaviour and all sorts of things, I think we should also be pushing the Somerset Code of Conduct for parish and town councils, which was developed in 2023, because I had one inquiry this week from a council that had not yet adopted it. So that sending that out to everyone actually is quite helpful, because that includes Somerset's current position on
Yeah.
Code of Conduct for parishes. It's for each individual council to adopt it and to re-adopt it in their annual meeting every May.
Yeah.
But that's important. They should be doing that, actually going through that process. And
I agree. But from experience, this bill is boxing exercise. You know, it's along with all the other policies that we have to do.
in many councils, sadly, it is. But if we do a push on the main, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just checking with Alan, that my understanding was correct, of course, but although we have put together this code of conduct, we're only advisory.
Yes.
Situation,
Yeah.
they can decide to, they should decide to have one. They would have to decide to have one. It could be something written on the back of a flag packet.
Yeah.
And it's their own. We've been encouraging people, and I think it's right that we continue to do that. Otherwise, if nothing else, we have as the same code of conduct. Then
Most of them have adopted the LGA Code of Conduct.
Sorry, Francis.
Most of them have adopted the LGA Code of Conduct, on which ours is based. And they adapt it as they need to for them, in the same way as we have adapted it for us. And the difficulty with asking them to adopt ours is that every time we make a change, and we do every now and again, we have to go around them and say, oh, can you make the change too? And it's not on. It's so long as they're taking the LGA code, that should be enough.
Yes, I'm not sure whether I fully agree, but we discussed this in P1 anyway. But because I think one of the things that clerks have said to me, it is quite useful to adopt a code which gets updated. They don't have to then think about it; they just adopt a new one, as opposed to them.
And then adapt it.
What are the
every
implications of this? Let's have a meeting about it, see how we interpret that. They just pick it up and run with it, basically. So there's I've had a contravailing view, if you like, on that one. But no, I'll take your view.
Yeah, just to come back on that point, so just with an example that's outside of the code of conduct, if it's helpful. Because I work with my colleagues in other county associations, and yesterday we involved in the LGA on a recruitment campaign for town and parish clerks. It's not unreasonable, because training clerks is massively important as well. It's not just councillor code of conduct. There was a major change pushed through this year in the audit requirements, strengthening the requirement on city, town and parish councils to have a email address that is a council email address rather than a personal email address. And there's box 10 on the annual governance statement. And all clerks should be aware of that requirement. That is a requirement basically to change your financial regulations to be able to do audit properly, and they should not be ignoring that. So it's also not unreasonable every year to send out, we've updated the recommended code of conduct, and so we can help you to do that. Please consider in your annual meeting putting this clause through. So I just think repeat messaging is the answer to that one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? So I'm referring this back to P1, I guess, to sort of pick up and run in the detail and bring it back to this committee for the next meeting, which is 16th of October. Are we happy with that? An action taken forward?
Is that sorry, Chair, that's a quick question. Do we spell out what the differences are, what the amendments are that Somerset have made to the LGA? So it's clear where the two differ.
I'm not aware of that being done. No.
I mean, rather than people have going through
Yeah.
the whole document.
No, well, I'm fully in favour when any amendments come around any document. But the amendments are highlighted.
Yeah.
You don't have to read the whole bloody thing. So, excuse my language there, but you find it's in there somewhere, don't you? Basically, your problem.
So it would be normal standard practice through you, Chair, to whenever, so for example, a constitutional change. So when the Unitary Council changed its constitution in May 25, the changes that in that constitution were set out in the covering report, right, particularly focusing on changes that as a result of feedback or what the reasoning for those changes was likely to be. Yeah. It is good practice, like you say, version control. Yeah, but it should be really clear part of that adoption process that when you are being presented with a change, either town, parish, or even unitary council level, that there should be a very clear understanding of the changes. So you as members are not just presented with these adopted text. You understand the changes and the implications of adopting that, and the officers are allowed to work that way. Clearly, a clerk of the small parish council will approach it one way, whereas I, as monitoring officer, the unitary council will approach it entirely different. But there should be that ability to track it.
But if we're sending it out, we should send a report
And
rather than ask the clerk to do it.
forgive me, Chair, I will check whether when we send the third thing out, the code of conduct, I will ask what we do around version control.
Certainly think the version control, any of those sort of things, just standard practice situation to make it easier for people to know where they are and where they aren't. The final thing I think I'd just say, just perhaps on the names of courses, and probably for you, and sometimes having been involved in this area for a lot of my life, sometimes you have to make the course look as if it's attractive, the name. So a chair's course might not be the most attractive. It might be managing meetings effectively. I don't know, I'm not going to write things for you, but something along those lines, and then it's intended for chairs and anybody else.
That's why we've called it making councils meetings work.
That's why I picked that one. Yeah. I've been there on a number of occasions. Okay, so I'm going to put it there that we're going to refer back this, and I'll pick, there may be some other issues. We're going to look at the whole process of the code of conduct and the, well, we may decide to separate the code of conduct and the complaints side to P1, and we'll have a discussion about a date for the meeting at the end of this. Actually, I've just got one tiny sort of technical issue on the, I added up the number of complaints, the 4-1. I came to not 61, 62. And, but I just thought perhaps somebody could check my maths before it goes wider. Somebody else picks it up. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm not, I'm not. And also I thought it'd be quite useful to have alongside where you've got the 5 separate incidents and the 9 separate incidents, column that just therefore listed the number of those at the bottom as well as I got one extra. Was later tonight, so. Obviously, I must have.
You're worth it.
Thank you.
Apology, but if there's an error.
No apology required, so I'm not really near this apology. Okay, let's move on to the quarterly update then. I've looked through, back to you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Rather than sort of reheat some of the debate we've just had, I'll just direct members to the trends and themes section. Obviously, there's a lot of data in the report, but the trends and themes pretty much set it out, particularly the pie chart. It gives you that visual representation of the areas that we've seen over the last quarter, particular, and they pretty much stay with the theme we just discussed. At that point, Chair, I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. And I'll just make one comment before we do start. There is a column at the end, which is called time involved in the complaint. So while it's not a cost there, it's actually got the time involved, so that's great. I was talking about earlier on. Over to the floor then for questions. David.
What's the line between bullying and disrespect?
An excellent question. It tends to be in the eye of the beholder, if I can use that language, so that they would determine where that would fit and how they would determine that. We don't often, as monitoring officers, see the point in arguing the case around which one that would fit into, unless it is incredibly clear. So if the individual that's raising the complaint believes that it is disrespect, or they believe it's around disrepute, whatever it may be, we tend to follow that line through. It's only if it's become blatantly obvious through the investigation that actually it firmly fits within one of those things, but we tend to go with what the complainant is raising. We have had situations in the past where my experienced monitoring officers have debated the point about, no, it's not a matter of disrespect, it's a matter of bringing a cat. And that becomes the substance of the debate. It's not worth the power of a shot.
Because between those three, disrespect brings the council to disrepute and bullying. Behaviour.
Good point, David. Thank you very much. You.
Yeah. Why is it that we're not informed about the behaviour of any of our councillors when they are reported, and yet we don't get an outcome? I personally was involved with two. One was against me, and another one was behaviour of a member of our council. And nothing was done. They're still at that board. They weren't banned. There was nothing came back to me, and I find that very, very strange. Where in one case, I had an officer sitting by me, pointed out the behaviour of a person, and I went and saw monitoring officer as then, and he said, "Oh, the lady sitting by you has emailed me. I know about it. Well, she told me," and I said, "I'm on standards. I'm going to report this now." And yet I never had the outcome of that. I'm amazed that we're doing all this booking, and yet here we are, not even have the information relayed back to us, especially when it was reported there. So there's something wrong in our system. Thank you, Jack.
I think, yeah, let me take that away around the issue, because the process sets out that if we have an investigation and the complaint is upheld, that the individual that submitted that complaint is notified, the individual where the complaint was submitted against is notified, and to Martin's point earlier, we often notify the leader of the group, so that they are clear on what the issues are in those extreme circumstances. But the one thing I want to check, Chair, is if there is nothing to be done as a result of that complaint, how that outcome is reported. My understanding was that the complainant was notified, and that the individual that submitted the complaint, the person that had the complaint submitted against them, was notified as well.
This is perhaps related to the getting your point clearly view that the situation I talked about earlier on, where we had a hearing group, certain recommendations made that we weren't given by hearing group or Somerset Council. They were given by the parish council. And I think that's the area where we needed to know that that had actually been implemented and that was sort of confirmed. So I think we need processing, and that's part of what we want, so that happens on a daily basis. And that there is a checking processing. We don't have any powers to say you must do this. It's a complete suggestion, if you like, or a recommendation rather. So yeah, we may need to pick up the outcome. The other side, of course, is the anonymity, and we're trying to sort of walk a fine line between giving people information, but not enough to actually be able to identify people. That's and I think that's pick that one up under the P1 discussion, which might have a big brief, and we might need to think about that. So that's a taking point of view. No point in actually sitting here and putting all these policies in operation if we don't actually check that actually where we have the power and we ask people what they've done where we don't have the power. Otherwise, I think people will say, "Oh, that's." Thank you, Hugh. Any other questions in the room? Got nobody outside the room. Okay, thank you very much. So let's move on to the standards committee with hospitality. You back in 20 minutes?
I'm here.
Over to you.
So I don't particularly want to go through any detail of the report. The detail is set out in the appendix of the records submitted. I think this one you've seen before in terms of style. So any questions or anything?
Floor's yours. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Might I refer members to Appendix B first, please? I am delighted to see the almost detailed explanation of why officers have received or rejected Ipswich Hospitality. I think it shows the standard, the high standard of officers we have in this council. I thank Alan for making sure this works. I would draw specific attention to page 44, the bottom one on page 44, and the bottom one on page 47 of the agenda pack, both relating to Glastonbury, and interestingly, the first one would have been inappropriate or improper and inappropriate to accept this offer. It's a free accommodation, and the second one was where the person was involved in Gold Command, didn't need to use the facility. You refer then to Appendix A. I am appalled, absolutely appalled. And one thing first, Chairman, it would appear that all members of the executive were offered, some accepted, tickets for Glastonbury. One that hasn't made any note is Councillor Graham Oakes on executive, and I wonder perhaps, Chairman, if either Alan or somebody lower down might have a little whisper in his ear just to make sure he has perhaps not forgotten to make that declaration. It does seem odd that one member of executive hasn't been offered a ticket, and everybody else has. It is also interesting to note, Chairman, that two members were offered tickets in 2023 as well as 2025, and three members were offered tickets in 2023 and 2025, and two members were offered them. So one member was offered it in 2024 and 2025, and appeared to have accepted them on both occasions. I know I'm renowned for using the phrase "the man on the Clapham omnibus." What does he think of this? It doesn't show our members in a very good light if they are simply saying, I'm an executive member, therefore I've accepted it. Doesn't wash the general public out there. I think a quiet word in executive members' ears needs to be had, because this is not on. A little more explanation, perhaps, if they want to accept.
Right, on page 33, the reason for declining the councillor Shearer gave seems to me the right one. She's conscious of the role that she has and that what she needs, and whether accepting the tickets would have made any difference. And she felt it wouldn't. That seems to me a very pertinent comment.
Thank you. David?
There was some email correspondence about this. From, I think from Alan, and I think somebody responded.
I did respond, I can't remember.
So I think there were,
Yeah.
the email correspondence, suggest, gave reasons why a particular councillor was attending. In fact, that he was local, that he was sort of involved in the planning group. And so, represented the interests of the community. And I can see that that's very valid. But it's where there's not that interest.
I think that probably was what I said at the time. That's certainly what I would say that the ward councillors, I think, if it was at any event really in the ward of that kind of level, they'd probably expect to go. Not simply to amuse themselves, but to be present in that capacity. And I do take Anna's point. I think if you're chair of the licensing committee, might be justification. If you're directly involved, but we, in terms of investigating health and safety, child protection, we've got officers that do that. And I'm afraid, I agree. I don't quite see why executive members or anybody else would necessarily need to receive passes to go to Glastonbury. And I wonder if this committee might suggest, there might be a suggestion from this committee of those we think should be entitled to accept those tickets and those we shouldn't. Simply a list of those people those members we think it's appropriate to accept the tickets.
This is something like going back a stage. When I was an executive member, none of us were offered tickets. Is there something about actually talking to Glastonbury and saying, why are you doing this?
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Martin. Alan?
Just to offer advice to committee to follow Councillor Dimmery's point. He was chair, could write to the leader of council if you wish to do so, seek clarification on this matter in the debate that's been had, and to raise the points that have been raised at this meeting. Chair has one way of addressing it in the first step. If that's something you want to do, that would be one way in which I've seen other councils address this matter, or matters like this. And it's not, I'm making no attempt to defend or make any statement associated with that, or that is not my role, but it might be worthy of discussion with you, Chair, in the first instance.
Yes, I found, sorry, go on.
Can I pick up on what Francis said a minute ago, because that's a sea change. I've not been on the council that long. Was it not the case then that previous executives were offered and did the executive member request?
I was 10 years in the executive and never had an offer, and I don't believe anybody else did, unless they were absolutely local. And I wouldn't say that if there was a local such person who was local, I wouldn't know, but it was not something that was sent out to executive members.
Yeah, I don't think that any council should be involved in any of this, apart from if you've got like an official functionary who's doing some presentation of some kind, like the chair of council or something like that.
To the extent that when Ofsted decided to come and inspect children's services, during the week when Glastonbury was on, and they were very upset that they were going to have their travel plans upset. And then said, right, well, they needed to be inside the festival. The answer from the council was, then you need to ask the police to get you in because there is no other way.
So I don't think any can contribute. As I said, we've got officers to do that. They don't need to stay there for a week, do they? So.
Okay, well, we're focusing on Glastonbury. Just a few thoughts of my own, if I might make. It is a huge event in Somerset's both business and economic terms. There's an interesting point here, and I'm not going to make any points to dictate. Actually, going to ask one of the priority groups, priority three, to look into the situation. Wider than just Glastonbury. But I have my own thoughts, which I'll just make at the moment. It seems to me that if there is a need to be there, and I'm just trying to think my way through this. If we've got planning application or a licensing application, and one is involved in it, I personally tend to go out to the council and visit the site, talk to people, find out on the ground. So where does that stop with Glastonbury? And I don't want that to be a debate, but we need to be clear about that. I think when we do give these guidelines, that we might come up with. And I think so. Think about how it might apply. It's a big event in Somerset's calendar, so we need to be supporting it. But my own thoughts are really, perhaps I won't give those. I'll ask P3 to look into not just Glastonbury, but the whole areas of gifts and hospitality. Before we do that, first thing I wanted to say was that first thing is that people should declare things. So perhaps we can ask Josh whether there's anything come through on Alan from Councillor X.
My understanding, Chair, was that I believe Councillor Oakes was on leave, but let me take that one away and clarify. I have seen correspondence on that matter, so I'm surprised it's not on the list. And Josh and I just been sharing the list originally. So leave that one with me, and you're happy to deal with that informally at this stage.
Yeah. Oh yes, I know.
I will raise that with Councillor Oakes in the first instance to make sure there's not something in the process that's falling down. And if it's not a process, that's the.
Yes, if we just say that Councillor Oakes is completely, it doesn't know that all the executive would be invited, in which case that is a point that Alan's made. The first thing is we want to encourage people to declare things, because it's the people who we don't know about we can do nothing about. So we do want to encourage that. So I'd applaud people for sticking this on the list. The question is how we interpret that, and I would like to propose that P3 picks that one up with that. I just make one more point as we now move on to the people who have declared, and I know perhaps I'll stop there because I'm going to put words into P3. David.
We did look at this, was it 2 years ago maybe?
Yep.
In some depth, and I think there were suggestions that everything should be disclosed, whether it's a cup of tea with or and I think the one thing that to me I'm not sure has been resolved, but there seems to be disparity between what we're asking Somerset Council and parish councils, because on the declaration that I can't remember whether this year it was the same, but it was £75 for there was a difference, it was 50. But I think it was different for the two. Yeah.
I think that's a thing that I'd like to suggest that P3 looks at, which is we should have code of conduct, also a declaration. That I know there's an issue that we've got suggestions, proposals, orders coming down of what we should do, but I think it should be consistent with the officers as well, and use the same sort of format to respond. But that's, I don't want to again refer that, but is P3 happy to pick that one up? P3 is Martin, you, Alan and Sally. So take, basically what I'm suggesting is, to be clear, take on the data that we've got now for this year, look at that and review, one, is the process, and look at the officers as well. Is the process comprehensive? Could it be improved in any way? I'll suggest, can we reduce it in any way? let's reduce paperwork where we can. And come back to this committee at the next meeting. Hopefully with a report. But I didn't do it. So that's, so are you okay with that? Hugh, Alan, Sally, and Martin? Martin's the chair of that particular.
Oh, thank you. I'd forgotten.
There is no extra money, no money goes within mine, but Hugh, who, I said I'd apologise for Hugh, he's forgotten the biscuits.
That's
Maybe an extra biscuit.
all of you.
I'm sorry, Josh.
Maybe an extra biscuit for the chair, what I was going to say.
Josh, could you put that in an email? Do you mind putting this so I can remember which is in the group and then I can get in touch with them?
It's
Mike, right, it's fresh in the mind.
on the back of the work programme.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, just will do that.
Yeah, thank you anyway. Yeah.
So the back of the work programme's got variety groups, their areas they're looking at, children. Oh, Francis, sorry.
Are we still on this?
We have moved. I made a
Can I
proposal,
raise a different point, or am I in the wrong place to do that?
but I can't tell until you tell me what it is.
It is about the officers' declarations of interest. And absolutely, I agree entirely with Alan about the openness, and that's absolutely great. And I entirely understand why it may be appropriate to accept invitations to lunches or to dinners or even to a golf thing in order to network and to talk to other people, which will be useful for work. And I noticed one of them said it was an opportunity to network with other authorities attending, finding out more about how they approach issues, and you'll be taken to attend. That sounds absolutely right and proper. What I don't understand is why it would be, what would be the benefit to the authority? There's a clear benefit to the authority of that. What's the benefit to the authority for bottles of wine to be given and accepted? I can see, I mean, the flowers sent by the Department for Education as a thank you. It's an ephemeral thing. They'll die. That all of that sounds absolutely totally right. But opportunities for networking, absolutely. And the very scrupulous declaring of a family holding a bingo game to give money to CAOP, which is Cost Children's Services, and an officer declared it, which was I think almost over and above what could possibly be asked for. But it seems to me that there needs to be something about why is it good for the authority to accept this, and particularly invitation to British Parking Awards in discussion regarding a possible contract extension. I mean that one felt not right. And I was very sorry for the resources and strategy transformation. We did decline it over the telephone, but they sent it anyway and personally delivered and left it. So, you know, I sort of see the point there. But I'd like to see not so much the reason why it was accepted or rejected, but what's the benefit to the authority of doing so, of doing either. I don't know whether that, am I being an unreasonable bridge?
No, you're never going to be that. But I'll ask Alan to comment in a moment, but I will give an example of my own where I was asked to give the awards or do the prizes for a village flower show.
Yeah.
And I said, they said, oh, we always give the a bottle of wine. I said, well, I did.
Yeah.
Can't bother to declare it. And put it in the raffle. Anyway, it duly arrived at my house when I wasn't there. And you're in the point there of how churlish are you going to be by rejecting it. So I declared it.
Yeah.
And I went into Tesco's, found out where it was bought and how much it cost, put that in.
Yeah.
But I think we want to encourage people to be open
Yeah.
as possible about these. So my view always has been, whatever it is, even if it's way below the amount,
Say what it is.
just declare it.
But to say, a gift of 6 bottles of wine from Walters, who's one of our roads contractors and rather a good one, but they are winning contracts from us and will want to go. And yes, I accepted it because it was part of a gift to the wider service. What's the benefit to the council? That's my question.
Yeah.
Which one was no answer at all, with no reason given
No
for it.
reason given for it.
For taking the vote, exactly. Am I being grinchy about one bottles of wine? Probably.
Well, we are going to pick this up under my proposal of
Yeah.
P3 look at. So,
Yeah.
so I don't think we need to delay the point, but Alan maybe should comment. I'll pick that part first.
Without the chair putting kind of words into that at all, I think there's something here around, so my observation in looking at this, and not a matter that I intend to raise, but I will be now, was that in seeing this report, there's a need for greater levels of information from, so in this case, officers, I know, around why it was accepted and what was done with the what was done with the gift that was received, so that you as members are really clear and you as officers are really clear that why was it accepted and what was done with it. So, for example, you'll remember, I believe it was last year's report where a number of gifts parties were received in infrastructure and transport in particular. They were received, and those matters, I believe, they were raffled, and then there was effectively a charity donation as part of that process. That tends to be common practice. Those areas whereby gifts tend to come in because they happen to be working with contractors, they tend to be collected, the raffle is run, and the charity donation is made. I think in those instances, having that clarity within that final column just gives you assurance of members on how the gift was actually used. So the receipt of 8 bottles of wine, if we're looking at that one in particular, I think that the added information that I certainly picked up when I reviewed this report was, when are the wine?
Yeah.
Just so I know, it might be perfectly acceptable because below the threshold, just to be really clear, it is below the threshold.
Yeah.
But, and the fact that it has been declared is reasonable and appropriate. So this, I'm not suggesting there is a conduct issue here at all. But moreover, I think to ensure that we are upholding the standards that we have set, certainly if you were set as members and we would adhere to as officers, I think we need that practice. So I'll raise that with my colleagues at
Can I just add one final thing and then I'll really. However well and properly it was dealt with, the charity, the raffle thing is absolutely right. The only reason that company gave that contractor gave it to us, and we did the right things with it, and we declared it, and we did good things for charity with it, is because we as a council will feel more warmly to that contractor. That's why they do it. So even if we do the right things with it, is that right?
Sure, I think that's that with the additional information, standards committee can make that judgment and application to, that's ultimately the route through as part of those processes. So with the additional information which I've heard loud and clear, I'll take that back to officers to ensure that's adhered to. And the second point then is, as a result of that additional information, we choose to provide advice to council on how you think that should be dealt with and recommendations. And that's, again, I made no comment on whether just the process would be as part of that. I think there are a number of instances in this report that give members confidence, whereby you can clearly see that gifts have been refused because the process has been adhered to, or we are in a procurement exercise. And again, there's nothing in this that would cause me any monitoring perspective, any alarm bells to ring on the basis of anything that's been received or.
Martin, Alan, and David.
I mean, if I'd joined this council in the hope of seeking gratuities, I'm bitterly disappointed. and it's interesting to see that things are offered. But anyway, yes, I would support what Francis is saying there, and about that. But also, there's a discretion here, isn't there, that you can't really, you have to factor in an element of discretion that if people are offered something. We had this debate, as David pointed out, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, where we were actually saying, look, if you're offered a cup of tea, you've got to write it down. That was thrown out of full council. And some people were quite adamant about that. Some people were really hostile towards the view that we put forward. And I was rather surprised at that. But yes, I think that's just a general point, and I'd like to make another point, if I may. It's actually on the councillors one. I see one councillor was offered a trip to Vienna, but he notes, and right properly, that he this was undertaken on his current position as vice chair of New Leaf, not representing the council. That's fine, but does that compromise his attendance or contribution to any debates on nuclear energy and our current, construction?
Well, sorry, I'm going to try and reply to that. I think we've got the sort of the procurement process, for example, that Alan talked about, which should be robust enough to pick up these declarations of interest on the way through. So there's another element that we need to take account of. And I would have thought in that situation, without comment on particular details, that someone should be declaring that. They have done, and therefore that should be there, that discussion. But we're all that planning, but Alan may have another view about it.
Chair, in terms of looking at this particular issue, given that New Leaf's focus on legacy, particularly on the management of legacy sites in particular, that I can see why that would be at least for accepting it, not relating to new construction sites, New Leaf doesn't cover those sites.
He doesn't. I mean, legacy advisory is a very broad term, and I don't quite understand what that might mean. But there's obviously legacy issues in relation to construction of the site, and technically aren't there that would affect areas like Bridgewater in particular. And is it could it be compromising in a situation, or is it like this? Is the devil in the detail?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Councillor devil is in the details. So, for example, a planning application being considered in a local area, by members that have been through this process or received this gift hospitality to declare it as part of that debate or discussion, so that there was no doubt. You can't participate in the debate, but by declaring it, it can be really transparently reported. And that's where we'd like to get to. That's the strength of this report, in my view, which is you can see it actually starts here as officers, certainly my officers, looking to then advise on actually this report if you're sitting on that particular committee or sitting on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Alan.
2 points, Chairman, picking up on Francis' point about the bottles of wine. I would be fairly confident to say that that any contracts that the council is awarding would be scrutinised. The tenders for those contracts would be scrutinised by somebody other than the actual officer who would be awarded the contract. So something like that, the 42 pound bottle. If that had happened on 3 or 4 occasions and they had come in with, using the wrong words, but they'd come in with an obscure sort of tender, that would start to ring bells. So that's a point I think we need. I know from my experience that such things do get looked at and may well ring bells when it happens. Nothing. Pick up on Martin's point, Mike Caswell, I think, needs to be congratulated for actually declaring this. He need not, because it's not part of his duties as a councillor, but he's put it in case it comes in later on. He's done this before, if I remember rightly. He does this fairly regularly, and good luck to him, because he's covering his back, and that's what members should be doing. And he's being open and honest.
Thank you.
David, just a quick point to that, Alan referred to about cumulative over time, so we're looking here at individual. I guess on the declaration, was anything that maybe the smaller value, but cumulatively might. There are cumulative sort of threshold as well as individual.
Year on year. Not aware of it.
I think it's good practice. So I'll illustrate it with a poor example. It's not real. But just a hypothetical situation whereby an officer receives a bottle of wine a week that's below the threshold for declaration. I would fully expect over a certain period of time that officer, and that is the guidance, would declare that receipt over that particular period. So it's not just about receiving it 1 week, that being below the threshold over a significant period of time. We would expect them to declare that process. That would be standard practice. So if there is a general theme of that, ultimately as well, it's in all officers in this case are bound by their code of conduct, and anything that brings the authority into disrepute, they make that judgment. There is training associated with it, and ultimately they have to make sure that they are adhering to that. If you see a bottle of wine for a week, for example, to give the example, we expect them to report that and to declare it and set out clearly the reasons for accepting it or refusing it for that matter. And there's nothing, I would hope we don't need to write that example down as an illustrative point. That officers should know and their managers should know exactly what's required. But you're absolutely right to raise it. It could happen. There could be instances whereby there is a drip feed that could result in officers being seen to be coerced as a result of that. I think that's what this process is intended to design out.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, so my proposal is that we refer a review of the kitchen hospitality based on the annual report for both officers and members to P3 Group. I already told you that's what I'm saying. I'm sure as using the group, you will ensure you get an extra biscuit as chair. I can't speak on his behalf.
Not to declare.
Oh, yes. Well, I was going to report you earlier for using bad language. I think you just apologised for your use. I'm afraid I'm going to have to put in a report.
Please do, please do. It's, you know, give us some extra work.
From recollection, Jay did deal with it in the room, so I think it's.
Yeah, all right. Look at it.
I was just using something about the colour. Anyway,
Didn't even
yeah,
hear it.
just, but it is, I mean, I've just come back to the point that actually we do want to encourage people to do this, declare things. So we don't want to make it onerous, so that people don't do it, find a way of hiding it. We want to get everybody to do it. So I think it's an annual situation where people are aware of it, and the document's a public document. We know it's in the area of the paper, which Alan very kindly said, you know, they're going to get the August organ myself. So critical we find a way of getting that balance. Don't know what we don't know. I'll give you a little anecdote very quickly. It was when a friend of mine was running a sales team. Salesman came in and put his expenses into the month rather. In there was a hat. Said, well, you wear a hat any other time of the month, you can't put it in the business expenses. They said, no, go back, take it out, take the hat out, and bring the expenses back. He really did. No hat in there. And he said, I'm really pleased you take that hat out. He said, oh, the hat's in there, you've got to find it. That's what we want to avoid. Staff rules encourage responsive behaviour, and so, you know, let's just make sure we produce something that's workable, usable, and will encourage people. Once we encourage people, perhaps, you know, get more detail. So coming back to responsibilities of the priority group, it's to really come back to this committee with recommendations, or if they feel they've got a number of quite difficult things, then they may want to bring it back for discussion. But it is to spend the time and the detail that we don't have in the hour or 2 hours we have here, get into the depth. And that's really helpful for the committee. It's helpful for everybody else. It doesn't take the responsibility from this committee at all in any way, shape or form. It does mean that people can get it detailed, get on their brief, and also be able to bring some recommendations or actions back here for the debate. So that'll be for the next meeting. We may, hopefully that can be done. So I'll move on to the last item, which is for a global update, which on the support package for councils. I think Ewan may be doing this, but this is part of the action from the last minutes that there is a report to come to this meeting. Sally very kindly reminded me of this yesterday. It's not available at this stage, and so it needs to move forward, but it was going to be covered by this verbal update, doesn't it? Done. Did you know you were going to be asked to do this?
I did not know I was going to, my apologies, it was completely with my attention. Was I required to submit a report?
No, it wasn't you that was going to submit that. I suspect it was officers that were going to submit the report to this committee. But I just had a feeling that you said, well, you're there, so you'll bring us up to date. But apologies for that, because I'd rather put you on the spot with information that I understood. So let me perhaps move very quickly on and say that this report needs to come to the next committee meeting, and ideally before then if we can. Just remind people what we were looking at, and it relates to the comments I made right at the start of the meeting about knowing what can offer people. Got a range, and you'll all remember the discussions we had, and not just the last meeting, but the one before that, about the training package and the presentation that you and his team made in the open day. But we also felt there was a need for support in a more consultancy basis, on a more one-to-one individual basis, probably what I'm looking for. And that's what was being looked at, how we could promote that in order that people are aware of that, or whether we don't promote it, but we certainly need, there is a need for that. And it's happening anyways, part of how we actually show people we've not got a stick here, but also a carrot. You are now.
What I can do is I can provide a verbal update on what is currently available, which is probably fair, and then you might need to think about from committing colleagues to things that we haven't discussed yet.
Yeah.
So I will share a link again to what is available on the South website, which is public. So we have a members area and we have a public area. So any members of this committee can go in and see the schedule of training courses going forward, what training courses they are. There are training courses for councillors, there are training courses for staff, which are equally important. The councillor courses start with basic training and code of conduct training, but as discussed earlier, will include details such as, or specialist areas such as finance, employment, chairing meetings, and the clerk's courses also cover the code of conduct because we do provide training for officers on the code of conduct for their information, but also the we have a series of what we call councillor essentials, which is clerk essentials, the essential clerk, which is we have councillor essentials for councillors. Clerk essentials is basically a 3-part course covering meetings, which is one part, finance, which is another part, and all of the general governance before the clerk has got sufficient experience for the full certificate of local council administration, which is the base qualification, and then there's the more university continuous professional development to do that. Beyond that, where we're going with Somerset Council colleagues is we have a one-day workshop scheduled in September with the Community Network Link Officer team to provide a slimmed down version of that course, 3-part clerk and essential clerk. Basically, we're going to do each bit in an hour. So we're going to do something on code of conduct in an hour. We're going to do something on the basic council training and what we're telling councillors in an hour. Then we're going to do the essential clerk in an hour. Because this is something we've been debating with the officer team and the local community network, the management team and parish liaison as to what level it is appropriate to go to. There are the 2 managers and 2 of the more experienced link officers, one of whom has gets demographic services, so he's very qualified. Both want to do the full silk. But we don't feel it's appropriate for everyone because we don't think they've got the detailed experience yet in parish and town council operations. So all of that is available to the public. It's there. We promote it to parish council. Please continue to promote parish council. We're also up for developing further training packages. And I will just add that the one-to-one support, the way it works is we have an info@somersetlc.org.uk email address, which is published on our website. We prefer any councillor or clerk who has an inquiry, because we field all sorts of inquiries, like some conduct meetings. They might include code of conduct, they might include some detailed finance matter or HR matter. We respond to each of them individually in writing to council. Actually, recently, we don't have the resources that Somerset Council has, and it's an enormous IT budget. Finally, we've recently implemented a customer relationships management system. So we actually now have that in a way that multiple members of staff, i.e. Sam and myself, can go in and check, has this one been dealt with? And then I might respond to ones what I do code of conduct, and Sam does the regular council business type. So we encourage councils to get in touch in writing. It's just far easier for us to process. If someone actually writes to us with what the problem is, because then we do like to search the relevant part of the legislation that guides them rather than say our opinion is this. So all of that is there, would benefit from more promotion. But actually value the conversation we had on Friday about how we would work more closely with the monitor officer team in providing, I guess, more informal advice at an early stage of a complaint or a dispute.
Right, okay.
Sorry. If I may, Chair, just to supplement that, I think that it was the first conversation that you and I have had while I've been in the role of monitoring officer. You and I have worked together for a number of years, but I think one of the benefits of that is sharing some of the information that's discussed at this committee and then debating how to best address those issues to ensure that we're kind of looking in the blood as early as possible, because that general steer from the committee previously about that approach. So welcome the dialogue, and we will need basic for Christmas then. So just to humans.
Okay. David, thank you, Ryan.
Yes, can I question for you, Lorraine? So, and actually at the last meeting, we did discuss, although it might not be specifically relevant to the situation with general power company and the need for councils within LCN or a council within an LCN to have that general power company. So with Hestica, we found that we got graciously money from South, but it needed one council to administer to receive that on behalf of the rest of the LCN and distribute that money out. So, you know, what is involved, and it seems to me that the only way we can make LCN work to councils to have general power companies and be prepared to the money on behalf of the LCN generally. So how, my question is, now how onerous is it for a client to step up to that level? Is the limit? And is there anything we can do?
You'd like me to respond to that?
Yeah, just make another comment. I think wherever possible, particularly as we're asking council to take on more responsibility, that the clerks are trained and therefore could be part of that general power of competence qualification, if you like. So it's not just about us in standards, what we're trying to do as an authority as well. So it's, you know, joined up thinking, we bring those both together. So, Francis, can I ask you to respond, or have you got a question?
It's a question to add into that,
Okay.
that
Okay, well,
which you might be able to answer as well.
Could you?
And my understanding, and this is what I'd like confirmed, is that in addition to the training of the clerk, the members have to be elected to the parish council. Many of the smaller parish councils co-opt because not enough people come forward to require an election. Are they debarred from, even if they get their clerk trained, and why would they bother to get their clerk trained if they can't have the power of competence anyway? A little bit on that.
So my understanding is if you're co-opted, but you go through an election, you are.
But you're going to go through an election.
But you don't have that. No, but if you go through the opportunity.
But anyway.
Hand both those questions over to you, Ian.
All right, I will do the technical one first and then the more general point, because very in favour of training generally. So to declare the general power of competence, yes, one, you need to have a qualified clerk. That's usually recognised to be the Silker qualification. Not enough clerks in Somerset have a Silker qualification, so please encourage No, there are some parts of actually fairly large councils that don't. There's one quite a large council who is currently going through the silver course, which is great, but you might be surprised that at the moment they don't have it. There are others that I don't believe have started training. It takes a year, so we usually ask them to have a year's experience before joining. It will then take a year because it's a coursework and it includes things like you've got to submit a grant application. So it's got like lots of demonstrated coursework within approximately the year it takes. With a lot of support from Sam Winter, who is our silver trainer for Somerset, and taken over from David Mears, who's Bridgewater, and he does the senior level now. And Sam then provides a year of support after they've gone through. So to be recommended, the next intake will be early in, I think it's February onwards next year, because we're waiting for the national body to issue the latest standards. So we can't go in September. But on the elections, yes, you need also to have 2/3 of elected members. And that means, yeah, in the last elections for 2020, next elections are 2027. So there would have been councils that did have that box at the time, but there's been resignations since then. Whether or not there was a contested election doesn't matter. It's whether you applied at that time and were on the list at the point where it was an uncontested election. Because there's lots of councils in that category. There are other extremes who had no applications to be a councillor. I can think of one in specific that didn't. And then they may have had elections between, so being co-opted doesn't tick the box. If you're co-opted in a meeting, you're not an elected councillor. No. If there are cases where some Somerset Council does then administer an election parish, one in Mere recently, there are others out there.
You have to quit a pop.
There's more than that appearing these days, but you'll have to tell me the latest figure. So yeah, I'm afraid that is a bit of a constraint.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Apologies. So if you're co-opted, I then go through. So if I've been co-opted, I was co-opted in 2021.
I was then co-opted but then elected in 2022. Or
well, we didn't have an election.
But if you were actually got yourself nominated,
yeah,
and were officially in the Somerset Council system, and then there wasn't a contested election, but it published there were 6 parish councillors elected, you are elected. Yeah.
So I'm going to draw this to close, because I think perhaps we pick this off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think
Happy for people to come to me, by the way.
yeah, thank you, as always. I think we do want to, as a council, encourage our confidence in parish councils, particularly as they've got more responsibilities now. And I think it's right we do that because the class can be so vital, coming back to an earlier point about complaints, in handling that situation before we get to the Somerset Council. But because there are people who are in parish councils who can be very powerful and persuasive in a village you live in. So I'm going to draw that one to a conclusion, but I'll take one. Sorry, Ben.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll draw my.
Sure.
Yeah.
Apologise for nearly.
No, don't.
Take one more from you, and then I know.
Just one final point of information. There's one particular councillor who should be commended in LCN for driving the youth project.
Thank you, David. Okay, thank you very much for that. So what I'm going to propose is that we roll that forward for the next meeting. But I hope that we can have a report back before then. So that's the end date, which is the one in October I gave to you earlier. 16th of October. But hopefully we can have a report before then. But it is a matter of coming back to the point purpose of giving a comprehensive support package for councils, both in terms of the training, but also in support when things get very individual and very specific and more difficult. Then we need to be responding to that. And thankfully, over the last year, when we've been we started the year very concerned about how many we might have to deal with events. Then that hasn't been realised very well. Okay, the final thing was actually is the work programme. I will pick that up on the I will pick the work programme up. You've got a copy of it. We've got the standard things in. I will make sure the action, which I'll put on the chart in a moment when everybody's gone and I've got a moment to. I will put the actions on there for the following meeting, which we just talked about, and make sure that's comprehensive. And then we recirculate that. I'll send a copy of the plan around to everybody as well. Be as always in my handwriting. Read it. Count up. Okay, I think that brings us to the close of events. Thank you very much, everybody, for sparing the time this morning and for the very constructive, hopefully, debate that we've had. And I look forward to seeing the fruits of the priority groups over the next 2 months. Good summer. Thank you very much.